What's up, binge watchers? Welcome back to the channel. For today's video, I'll be talking about the Netflix fantasy drama series called Sweet Tooth, developed by Mickle and based on the DC comic book of the same name by Jeff Lemire. All 8 episodes are now available to stream on Netflix, and this post-apocalyptic story is set a decade after a global event called as the Great Crumble, in which most of the human population gets wiped due to a viral pandemic, and coincidentally all of the babies that are born thereafter are hybrids of animals and humans. Now, there is no strong evidence that these two are linked to each other, but due to disgust and fear of the humans to these creatures, they just ultimately decide that these creatures are the one who caused the virus. So our main protagonist here is a half boy, half deer, a 10-year-old named Gus, aka Sweet Tooth, who is out on a quest to find his missing mother, and he will be joined by this unlikely companion slash protector named Tommy Jeopard, a former professional football player. Now, before I continue with this review, I invite you guys, if you haven't subscribed yet to the channel, please hit that subscribe button if you're down for weekly reviews of movies and TV shows. And while you're at it, please give this video a like because it really helps the channel. Now, I gotta say, first few minutes upon watching this series, I'm not so thrilled about it because it plays out like every pandemic movie or show that has saturated my screen ever since the pandemic. So we get here scenes of patients getting sick, exhibiting fever symptoms, and there's this distinct twitching of the pinky finger. So once you have that, your time is running out. So I'm not so thrilled about this initially because I felt like I'm getting tired of these narratives, but fear not, because Sweet Tooth does something different here. This is a family-friendly post-apocalyptic show. We don't really have much of that when it comes to post-apocalyptic genre. It's usually gritty tone. Here it's light. I would liken it to the Netflix film that is released last month, which is Love and Monsters in terms of tone. So it's a breath of fresh air, and make no mistake, because there are still a lot of tragic elements here, tragic things that will happen, but it's not too overwhelmingly dark or overbearing for a general audience. The show succeeds in balancing the sweetness and the bitter elements of the series with that bright aesthetics, in bringing out this high concept fantasy family series that it's at the same time a survival thriller. Pulling off that tone is not easy because you have to balance that dystopic grim and that whimsical fantasy nature of the show, and I think Mickle did a great job in packaging this in the most marketable way. Most of the story is about the adventures of Gus and Jeopard, aka Big Man, mostly told on the perspective of Gus here, so we get that Spielberg movie wonder. They shot this in New Zealand, so we get a lot of sweeping shots of the landscapes and the wildlife, a lot of awe-inspiring cinematography here, and there's a storybook feel here, and it also helps that there's a nice touch of narration here by James Brolin to cap off the episodes. And the set pieces here are amazing, starting off with that lodge inside the forest with that adorable cottage where Gus grew up, and then later on we get to expand our world and we see an amusement park ruled by teenagers with no parents. So there's a certain wish fulfillment aspect to those scenarios, and yeah, a bunch of things to like about those backdrops to fully realize this world. We also have a bunch of subplots here, and one of the darker aspects here, it deals with the arc of Dr. Singh. He's a scientist who's looking for a permanent cure for his wife who has been inflicted with the sick. He will be faced with a lot of difficult decisions involving his medical ethics. It gets terrifying because in his arc also includes what are the measures that they do to contain that virus. Then we also have here an arc of Aimee. She's an introverted psychiatrist who decided to take in some of these hybrids, much to her risk. And then another character here is Bear, who is actually played by a young woman. She creates this animal army, a bunch of hybrid wannabes who vows to protect these hybrids because she believes that hybrids are a positive form of evolution, that this is way of nature's healing. So that is an interesting look for that character. And actually we got a lot of interesting characters here. Normally when it comes to these scenarios of having different subplots which will eventually merge by the end of the season, I'm not so invested in some of the arcs, but in here I'm invested equally in all of the arcs. It also helps that we have a lot of likable performances here. I'll start off with Christian Convery as Gus. You know that this young actor has charm, but it does not stop from being just a cutesy performance. I also love that the character is not portrayed to be someone who's annoying, because that is usually one of the pratfalls of having a young character as the lead of the series. He's still reckless and he can be naive, but everything happens in what's expected for a child, and it will be interesting to see that innocence get washed away as he gets exposed to the harsher elements of the real world. It's not hard to like this kid. He also has this unwitting father and son relationship with Nonso Anozie. You get that classic dynamic of a persistent kid and a tough guy exterior. So eventually they will warm up to each other. There's little information on the background of Jeopard here apart from him being a former professional football star, but in the final episode we can definitely learn some layers to this character. So another character that I would have to commend, just because I keep seeing this actor in comedic roles and I think he did an impressive performance here on a dramatic role as the father of Gus, is Will Forte. Now back to the tone of the show, since they're going for a family-friendly route here. The show has the tendency to oversimplify things. The show keeps talking about the complexity of the humans and how the world has become, but most of the time it kind of puts its character into binary labels of either good or evil. When you come to think of it, it's a bit counterproductive because these characters are supposed to be complex with their intentions and their ways. Most especially in the character here of General Abbott. I think he's the weak link of the show. He does remind me though of the Sonic supervillain named Eggman. Anyway, he's all about restoring the order, but this character is unable to break away from that stereotypical bland body of the show. Then again, I won't give much weight to that because I'm ultimately happy that they've landed on a family-friendly series, because I think this is the best way to market this material. Those decisions to tone down those edgy elements from the comic book is a wise decision and will ultimately fit the vision of the director here, because he's playing with light and dark elements. Admittedly, it started more on the light, but towards the end of the season, there are much darker elements. So I hope that the show is able to jump on that transition in introducing darker themes by the next season. I'm expecting a second season because I would be really pissed if Netflix cancels this show. Then another thing that I've noticed is in the comics, when I did a research, I've noticed that the characters of the hybrids here have more grotesque character designs. So there is a disconnect for me while watching this show, because the humans hate these kids and visually they look cute to me. They have these features of animals, but they're generally easy on the eye. So it's much believable in the comics because they have grotesque looks, and maybe that will be able to justify the misplaced anger and hatred that they have towards these creatures. Anyway, again, this is the more marketable version. So I do love that the practical and the CGI effects that they done here. There's a beaver character here, and should Netflix decides to give this show a run for a couple of seasons, I think this one has a merchandising potential in the same way that it can reach the popularity of a Baby Yoda. So you guys definitely have to check that out. But overall, this show has a lot of inspiring and heartfelt themes about hope and resilience. Most of the characters here, their agenda is to be reunited with their family. So that's ultimately an easy agenda to hop onto. And it also gives us a fresh perspective when it comes to post-apocalyptic shows, because themes of distrust and betrayal and self-survival are often the things that you're going to see, but the show kind of forefronts the friendships and the unlikely alliances that you're going to build along the way. So that is a wholesome thing, along with other themes about environment conservation, letting nature thrive, and giving animal rights. And yeah, the show does not really wallow deeply into misery, so I think they did a great job here in terms of pacing, in introducing a new world and developing character relationships and giving the heart of the story. So that is an efficient storytelling for me. Yeah, a lot of things to like in this show. So I'm going to give this one a 4.5 out of 5 stars. You might think that it's a bit high considering some of the issues that I pointed out earlier, but you know, I'm happy with the overall end product that they have here. I think this show breathes new life to the post-apocalyptic genre. So that's it for my review of Sweet Tooth. Have you seen this show? Let me know what you think in the comment sections down below. Also, if you enjoyed watching this video, hit that like button and subscribe to us for weekly content. Thank you so much guys for watching. Until then, see you on the next one.